From the final diary of a nameless concubine, they say every palace has its ghosts. But in the summer court, they won't hide behind walls or slip through shadows. They sit at the table, they walk the corridors. They sleep beside you, I know, because I buried one last night. And she was still warm. It began at twilight. The guards came without a word, as they always do, faceless, silent, dressed in the dust-colored robes of the night watch. One of them held a bundle wrapped in royal crimson silk. It sagged in the middle, heavy, and the corner was soaked with something darker than the silk itself. Blood, still wet. Take her to the tree, one muttered, without meeting my eyes. The tree, always the tree. They didn't say who she was. They never do, but the silk told me enough. No one wore royal crimson unless they had once shared the emperor's bed. And only those who did were allowed to die quietly. I bowed low, as trained, and reached for the bundle. It was heavier than I expected. Bones, soft flesh, perfumed skin still clinging to the scent of sandalwood and ambergris. Her perfume clung to my own arms after only a moment. It still does. The summer court is the most forgotten wing of the palace. No one comes here unless sent. The walls are old, sun-bleached and moss-covered. The lanterns have not been lit in years. There are no music echoes here, no laughter, no fluttering of silk sleeves brushing against columns. Just the sound of cicadas screaming into a sky that never listens, and under that sky is the peach tree. It stands in the farthest corner of the garden, alone, always blooming, even in the cold. Its blossoms fall red, not pink thick like velvet, and when they land on your skin, they leave a stain that smells faintly of iron. They say it's a sacred tree, that it grew from the grave of the emperor's first lover concubine buried alive for breaking his heart. Her blood nourished the roots, her sorrow lingered in the branches. That's where we bury them now. The ones who died too suddenly, too inconveniently. The guards left without a word. I carried her down the winding path behind the lotus pavilion, past the koi pond once filled with golden fish, now still and murky, past the bell tower that no longer rings, past the chamber where a girl named Din died 3 winters ago, and whose name no one says aloud anymore, and then the tree. The ground was already soft, fresh. I fell to my knees, dirt seeping into the hem of my robes. My hands found the spade hidden beneath the stone, just where I left it last time. I dug, slow, careful. The earth gave way like breath, warm, loose, as if waiting for her. Halfway down, I found silk ... Another body. Old, fragile, bones crumbled like moth wings when I brushed them. I dug deeper. By the time I reached a clean patch, my arms were shaking and my chest burned with the weight of breath I'd forgotten to release. I laid her in. One of her arms fell loose from the silk. The hand was pale, almost translucent under the moonlight. But what froze me was her hair. A lock had fallen from the wrapping, long, silver. Not grey, silver, like starlight. She was young. Couldn't be more than 20. And yet, something about her face, what little I glimpsed through the folds, felt ageless. Eyes half open, lips parted, like she'd died mid-sentence. Or mid-scream. I covered her gently. I don't know why. I've buried others before. But something about her, something about the way the blood hadn't dried, the way the moonlight refused to touch her skin. I whispered a prayer, not one I learned from the palace priests. One my grandmother taught me, back when I was still a child, before I was sold into service. May your name be remembered. Though your lips no longer speak it, may your soul find rest. Though your bones lie in secret. Then I packed the earth, smoothed it, planted 3 red blossoms from the tree on top ... The wind didn't blow. The petals didn't move, but I felt it. Someone was watching. I returned to my quarters before dawn. No one spoke of the girl. No one ever does. The maids whispered about new arrivals to the emperor's favor, about silks dyed from rare beetles, about a tiger gifted from a southern kingdom, about the sound of music coming from the red chamber last night. But no one spoke of the missing. I sat in silence, cleaned my hands until they blistered. Still, the smell of blood remained clinging beneath my nails, inside my wrists, soaked into the seams of my sleeves. Tonight, I write this so I do not forget. Because I've learned, the dead are forgotten not because they vanish, but because the living choose silence. They say we are flowers in the emperor's garden, adorned, admired. But when a flower wilts too soon, they cut the stem and toss it beneath the peach tree. And when the next one blooms, no one remembers the one that died before it. I remember her, her silver hair, her half-spoken breath, her weight in my arms. And if I am next, I hope someone remembers me, too. Some days, the palace forgets itself. The courtyards hum with laughter, the corridors echo with silk and sandalwood, and the maids gossip about petals falling in perfect patterns. And on those days, I almost believe this place is alive. But most days, the palace remembers. It remembers who it belongs to, and what it does to those who speak out of turn. It was the 7th day since I buried the girl with silver hair. Her scent still lingered in my chamber, faint but unrelenting, as though she had sat beside me in silence and refused to leave. I'd washed the sheets 3 times, scrubbed the stone floor with vinegar and lemon peel, burned sage from the western gardens. But nothing worked. Perhaps she didn't want to leave. Perhaps no one ever really does. That morning, I was summoned to the Emperor's southern pavilion, a rare thing, too rare. When a nameless concubine like me is called upon, it is usually not for pleasure or favor. It is because someone has decided I've seen too much, or remembered something I shouldn't. But the summons was real and brief. A single strip of parchment tied to a crimson lotus blossom. Attend. Before the 3rd bell, I went. Of course I did. I walked barefoot through the dew, so that I would not bring the dust of my chamber to the sacred halls. My hair was unadorned, my robes the simplest blue linen. I did not wish to catch attention, not from the guards, not from the eunuchs, and especially not from the women who watched behind lacquered screens. But it wasn't the emperor who waited for me. It was her, Lady Yu. Young, beautiful, and far more dangerous than anyone gave her credit for. She was draped in gold brocade, the phoenix of her dress spreading across her chest like flames. She sat behind a jade screen carved with peonies, sipping chrysanthemum tea as if she were in a dream. "You buried her," she said without looking at me. I didn't answer. There was no question in her voice. "She had lovely hair," Lady Yu added, "like molten stars. Such a shame." The silence stretched. A petal dropped from her hairpin, hit the surface of her tea, and floated there like a tiny boat adrift in poison waters. Finally, she turned her eyes to mine. Did she leave anything behind? I hesitated. Lied. Said no, bowed, left. But that was not the truth. She had left something behind. Tucked beneath her robe, bound to her wrist with a red string so thin I almost missed it, a handkerchief, delicate, ivory silk, embroidered not with flowers, as most women preferred, but with a single dragon, its coils tight, its eyes furious, its claws curled around a broken moon. A forbidden symbol. The dragon was for the emperor. No woman was allowed to wear it, much less stitch it. I hid the handkerchief in the lining of my pillow. I don't know why I didn't destroy it, but now I believe it was waiting to speak. That night, I held it to the candlelight. The dragon shimmered gold thread against bone-colored silk. But something else glinted beneath the embroidery, a thread out of place, a hidden stitch. I turned the corner, saw the symbol. A name, not hers, but someone else's. I froze. Not because I recognized it, but because I knew it wasn't supposed to be written at all. No concubine would dare stitch a court official's name into her belongings. It was treason, death. I read it again. Zhong Yuan. He was the royal calligrapher. A man of quiet voice and nimble hands, never spoke unless spoken to. Rumors said he had once written the death edict of a prince while the prince still lived, that he had sealed love letters for Empress Dowager herself, and inked curses into the walls of a rebel general's tomb. Why would his name be on her handkerchief? Had she loved him? Had he killed her? I kept the secret. But the palace, it has ears, and when secrets are too sweet, someone always comes to taste them. 2 days later, the calligrapher was found hanging from the beams of the ink chamber. His inkstone was shattered, his brush broken, and carved into the wood of the beam, scratched in desperate strokes, was the same dragon I had seen on the handkerchief. But no one mentioned the handkerchief. No one searched my chamber. No one even looked at me differently. That was worse. It meant someone knew and was waiting. Tonight, I burned the handkerchief, not because I feared for my life, but because I feared it had a life of its own. The fire hissed when the silk caught flame, and for a moment, I swear, I heard a whisper. Not a word, not a scream. Just the soft sigh of something being released or summoned. I write this now in the stillness of my room, lit only by a flickering oil lamp. The scent of ink mixes with charred silk and lemon peel. Outside, the wind rattles the bamboo chimes. No one sings in the summer court anymore. Not since Lady Yu fell ill. They say she cannot sleep, that she dreams of silver-haired women dragging her down a blood-soaked garden path. They say her skin blisters where the dragon was embroidered on her robe. They say the emperor has stopped visiting. But I know the truth. She opened a door, and the girl with the silver hair is walking through. Tonight, I will not sleep. Tonight, I listen. To the rustling leaves outside, to the hush of steps too soft to be real, to the whisper in the smoke. They are coming for Lady Yu, and perhaps soon for me. They say mirrors are doors, not to another world, but to the one we refuse to see, a world where truth does not blink, does not flinch, does not lie. Last night, I saw a girl in the Moongate mirror. She was not me. The mirror is ancient, a relic from the old dynasty, polished obsidian framed in white jade. It stands nearly as tall as I, nestled into the Moongate arch of the bathing chamber. No one remembers who placed it there, only that it's never been moved. They call it the silent eye, because no matter where you stand, it watches. It reflects nothing but what you fear most. I never feared mirrors. Not until last night. It was after midnight. The oil in my lamp had burned low. Its flickering made the shadows dance along the walls like silk serpents. I couldn't sleep, not since I burned the dragon handkerchief, not since I began hearing the sound of wet footsteps outside my door. So I bathed. The water was cold. It always is at this hour, but it kept me awake. A part of me hoped the chill would drown the scent of smoke and lemon that clung to my skin. Another part simply wanted to feel clean, if only for a moment. And that's when I saw her. She stood in the mirror, just beyond the arc of the Moongate. At first, I thought it was my own reflection, pale, wet, breathing. But then I blinked, and she didn't. Her hair was dark, like mine, but longer. Her eyes were deeper set, as though they had not slept in centuries. She wore the same robe I did, but it trailed behind her like fog. And her mouth, oh, gods, her mouth was curled into a sorrowful smile. Not kind, not cruel, just resigned. I turned to look over my shoulder. Nothing, turned back. She was still there. Except now. She was closer. I don't remember screaming. Only that my knees hit the stone floor hard, and my breath came in short, broken sobs. The mirror showed me alone again, just my own reflection, shaking, dripping. But on the edge of the glass, so faint it could have been a trick of the light, was the outline of a fingerprint, one pressed from the inside. I didn't touch it. This morning. No one believed me. Of course they didn't. A maid who hears voices and sees ghosts is simply tired. They offered me herbal tonics, a nap, a walk in the garden. But when I passed the corridor near the Red Lotus wing, one of the older concubines, a woman with clouded eyes and a mouth that always twitched like it was trying to say something, grabbed my wrist. "You saw her," she rasped. I didn't answer. "She lives in the mirror. She's looking for someone who looks like her." Her grip was ice cold, her nails dug into my skin. "Don't look too long," she whispered. "She thinks long stares mean invitation." Before I could speak, a younger maid pulled her away, apologized, said she hadn't been right since the year the Empress fell ill. No one else mentioned it again, but when I returned to my room, there were drops of water on my pillow. I had not cried. That night, I sealed the mirror with cloth. I lit 3 sticks of incense. I wrote the character for silence on parchment and tucked it beneath the frame. I whispered every prayer I remembered, even the forbidden ones, but dreams are disobedient. In the dream, I stood before the mirror again, naked, exposed, bones thin as paper beneath the moonlight. She stood behind me. This time, I could feel her breath. It smelled like cold rain and old perfume. She leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. "You took my name." I tried to ask her what she meant, but my mouth would not move. She raised her hand, touched my shoulder. Her fingers passed through me like wind. "Give it back," she said, "or take mine." I woke to the sound of shattering. The cloth I'd used to cover the mirror had fallen. The parchment was scorched. The incense had not burned down, but had snapped in half. The mirror was whole, untouched, silent, except at the very bottom corner, carved faintly into the obsidian, was a single character, not written, not etched, scratched. "You, Lady You, the one who questioned me, the one who now cannot sleep." Her name was in the mirror. But if the girl behind the glass wants her, why did she come to me? This afternoon, I watched the reflection of my hand, held it up to the light, counted the lines, the veins, the scars. But in the mirror, they were wrong. There was a scar on my palm I had never had. A thin line, curved, like the crescent moon. And when I lifted my fingers to trace it in real life, nothing, smooth, it only existed in the mirror. Like a memory that belonged to someone else. Or a future I hadn't lived yet. I no longer trust what I see. Not the mirror, not the faces around me, not even the one I wear. I avoid reflections. I eat only when alone. I speak less, listen more, and yet I feel her growing stronger. Each night, the mirror grows colder, the shadows longer, the space between dreams and waking thinner. I think she wants to live again, through me. Tonight, I heard her again, not in a dream, in my ear. Just before I closed my eyes, the lamp dimmed, and a whisper brushed against my skin like the brush of silk sleeves. "You is only the first." I write this with the mirror turned to the wall. But I can feel her behind it, watching, waiting. If I do not write tomorrow, it means she has taken my name. And someone else will write this journal, with my hands, but not my soul. There are sounds in the palace no one should ever hear. Because when they do, someone always dies. The bell in the East Tower is one of them. It hasn't rung in 5 years, not since the fire. Not since the girl in white robes leapt from the tower, with a prayer still on her lips and her unborn child clutched to her chest. They say she was a seamstress. They say she was the emperor's favorite. They say she was mad. But I know the truth, because I buried her. And I remember the smell of ash in her hair, and the red mark on her belly where the cord was cut too late, and the way her fingers were curled, not in fear, but in resistance. Since that night, the bell has been silent. The tower was locked, the staircase sealed. The emperor gave no order for its destruction, only silence. That is how he mourns, by pretending things never existed. The wind still touches its copper surface. The birds still perch upon its rusted rim, but it does not ring. It was not supposed to ring ... until last night. The rain began softly, as if the clouds feared they might wake something buried. It crept along the tiles and curled beneath the doors, whispering against the paper walls like a forgotten lullaby. I could not sleep. I hadn't 4 days. The mirror still stands, turned to the wall, but I feel her. She no longer speaks, only waits, and waiting, sometimes, is worse. So I sat by the window, watching, listening. The garden swayed, the pond shivered. And then it rang, once, low, deep, like a breath drawn in pain, like the heartbeat of something that had died long ago and remembered, just once, how to live. The sound stretched across the courtyard, through stone and silk and flesh. It passed through my chest like a blade made of sound. I dropped the brush in my hand. Ink spilled across the scroll, dark veins bleeding into the rice paper like roots seeking truth. I rose, slowly, as if drawn by something not entirely mine. The bell had called ... and something inside me had answered. The East Tower is forbidden after nightfall. Everyone knows this, yet, somehow, no guards stood in my path. No lights burned in the windows. No footsteps echoed behind me. The rain grew heavier as I crossed the narrow bridge. But I did not feel it. I felt warm, like a hand had slipped into mine. Invisible, familiar. The doors of the tower were open. That should have been my first warning, but I was already inside. The air smelled of iron and damp wood. The old staircase groaned with every step I climbed, as though the building remembered my weight. With each level, the sound grew louder, not the bell itself, but something beneath it. A hum, a voice too soft to understand, but too ancient to ignore. When I reached the top, the bell stood exactly as I remembered, cracked at the base, stained by smoke, wrapped with prayer scrolls faded into ash ... But someone else stood beneath it. She wore white, her hair was unbound, and though her back was to me, I knew her, the girl from the fire. I spoke her name, though I never knew it. It came from my lips like a memory. She turned, and her face was mine. But not the face I wear now, the face from when I was young. Before the palace, before the silence, before I was no one. She smiled, not kindly, not cruelly. Just as if she'd been waiting a long time. "Do you remember me?" she asked. Her voice was smoke and soot and lullabies. "No," I whispered. "Should I?" She stepped closer. The bell above her trembled. Another note began to rise. She raised her hand, not to harm, but to offer. In her palm lay a spool of red thread. "I stitched your name into the wall before I died," she said, "so I would not forget you. I don't understand. You were supposed to die with me." The bell rang again. A sharp, shivering tone that cracked the silence open like an egg, spilling memories that didn't belong to me. A room, a cry, a blade. A man's hand covered in ink. A scroll signed in blood. A promise broken, a name taken. "I gave you my breath," she said. "My voice, my silence." And then she vanished. No spring, no smoke. Only the red thread, still lying in her place. And the echo of the bell, slowly fading against the bones of the tomb. When I returned to my chamber, it was nearly dawn. The rain had stopped. The room was quiet again. But something had changed. There was a mark on my wrist. A red ring. Didn't hurt in the note to touch. It didn't touch. But it felt like memory, like you. Today, I spoke with the scribe who oversees the palace death records. I asked him to see if his name was ever recorded in the books. He shook his head. "There is no seamstress," he said. "Only the fire." The tower burned in light. But the girl, there was no girl. I pressed, frowned. "I don't think. I remember," he whispered. Strange. He closed the book, locked it, and looked away. I went to the tower again in the afternoon. The doors were shut. Seemed to have no trace of my steps. No sign of the bell ring. And yet, the red thread was still in my sleeve. I do not know who she is.
hear the bell will ring again, not to weird, not to move, but to awaken something that should never have slept. If you ever hear a bell in the night, run, or remember me, and say the infinite from the real concubine is meant to nurture and affection. Black as remorse, smooth as smooth, permanent as space, and it is only dangerous when the honey once remembers the truth.
And last night, the truth bled through. It began with a rustle, soft, barely a whisper against the paper walls. I had just extinguished my lamp, hoping to find a sliver of rest before the hour of ghosts. But the sound came again, gentle, almost polite, as if someone was unfurling a scroll right beside my ear. I lit the flame. No one, only my chamber, still, silent, familiar. Except on the floor, beside the base of my bed, lay a scroll I had never seen before. Ivory parchment, gold-threaded edges, and sealed in the center with a wax emblem I recognized instantly. The insignia of Jongyuan, the calligrapher who died with the dragon burned into his beam. I should have destroyed it. Every part of me screamed for fire, for salt, for distance. But my fingers moved on their own. The seal snapped like brittle bone beneath my thumb, and the scroll unrolled with a sigh, as if it had been waiting too long to breathe. The ink was dark, darker than black, almost red, and the words, "To the girl who wears a borrowed name, whose breath is stitched from another's last, who walks in a body that does not belong." I froze. The candle flickered. Beneath the words, the parchment began to ripple, as though it were breathing. And from the lines of calligraphy, ink began to bleed. It did not drip. It seeped, slowly, thick as molasses, pulling along the strokes, turning every character into a wound. And with every drop that hit the floor, I saw something. A mirror, cracked, a hand grasping from within. A girl screaming without sound, a name being torn in half. I tried to shut the scroll, but it would not close. My hands were stained, my wrists throbbed. The words changed. "Do not forget her, or she will become you." The wax emblem reappeared at the top, melted, then reformed into a symbol I had seen only once, on the silk of the silver-haired girl, etched behind the moongate mirror, and now, drawn in blood, the twin moon sigil of the first empress. No one speaks of her ... the one before all others. Before the dynasty was named, before the records began, they say she was mad, that she cursed her womb and gave birth to silence, that she wrote her own name into every mirror in the palace, and then vanished. I clutched the scroll and ran. Through the corridors, past the fishless pond, past the red pavilion where Lady Yu once slept, now guarded and locked. The rain had begun again, as it always does before something ends. I found myself at the old calligraphy chamber. Its door was sealed, wax and prayer papers crisscrossed in warnings. But the scroll in my hand pulsed, and the door opened. Inside, the air was dry. Dry like dust that had forgotten how to settle. Scrolls lined the walls, but every one of them had been turned to ash. All except one. It stood mounted on the farthest wall, glass-framed, untouched by time. I approached. The characters were written in crimson, not ink, blood. My own hand rose to trace them. My fingers trembled, my body went still, and as I touched the glass, my reflection blinked. Not in rhythm with me, but just slightly out of time, enough to know it wasn't mine. She smiled, the same resigned smile, the same silver in her eyes. Her lips moved, but no sound. She pressed her hand to the inside of the glass. I pressed mine to the outside, and in that instant, I understood. The scroll was not a message. It was a warning, and a key. Behind the wall was not another room, but a tomb built in ink and sealed with silence. For her, for me, for us. I turned to leave. The door had vanished. The candlelight dimmed. The air grew heavier. In the distance, I heard footsteps, soft, bare, echoing across paper floors and parchment ceilings. She was coming, not as a ghost, but as a name, returned. I awoke in my bed. Scroll gone, hands clean, mirror still turned to the wall. But carved into the wooden floor, by my sleeping mat, was a single sentence. When a name is erased, a shadow learns to write. I now believe I am not the first to write this diary. Not the second, perhaps, not even the original owner of this body. If our names are taken, and our stories lost, then we become pages, written over, again and again, until only ink remains. Tonight, I will not write my name at the end of this entry, because I no longer know which name is truly mine, and I fear, if I write it, she will finish the sentence. There is a room in the west wing of the palace, small, unadorned, always dim, even when the sun is high. No one sleeps there, not because it's cursed, not because it's haunted, but because once someone tried, and never woke up the same. Her name was Yellen. At least, that's what they whispered. The emperor never spoke it aloud. He called her only by her title, the one who watches. She arrived on a winter morning, veiled in white, with footsteps that didn't leave prints on snow. No one knew where she came from. No family, no retinue, no bridal ceremony, just a letter of imperial favor, a red seal, and a silence thick as ash. She was given the west wing, the smallest chamber. No attendants, and the rule: she must never sleep. I didn't believe it, at first. Who could live without sleep? Even gods in the old stories closed their eyes to dream of fire and fate. But Yellen, she stayed awake. She walked the courtyards at dawn. She watered the bonsai trees with bare hands. She sat beside the koi pond at midnight, eyes wide open, lips never moving. And when others dozed, lulled by music or wine or the lull of the rain, she remained still, watching, waiting. Some said she was possessed, others said she was a ghost given flesh. A debt the emperor owed, a punishment he dared not admit. But I saw her, once. And what I saw still clings to my lungs like cold smoke. It was the 7th day of the Plum Festival. Lanterns floated along the canals like soft stars. Drunken laughter spilled from pavilions. Music flickered like candlelight through the trees. I had been sent to deliver tea, a routine task, the kind that makes a girl invisible. The guards outside Yellen's chamber stood rigid, not with authority, but fear. They would not enter, would not even knock. So I stepped in. She sat in the center of the room, surrounded by mirrors. 12, in total, each reflecting her from a different angle. But none matched the movement of her body. She turned her head left. One reflection turned right. She raised a hand. Another lowered hers, and one didn't move at all. It only stared. I stepped back. My tray shook. She didn't flinch. "Leave it," she said. Her voice was dry, as if it hadn't passed through lips in days. Yet clear, unmistakably, awake. I placed the tea on the low table and turned to leave. But then she said, "Do you dream when you sleep?" I paused. "Yes." She smiled, thin, crooked, empty. "I envy you." That night, I asked the oldest maid in the kitchens. She lowered her voice, made me swear silence, and told me this. Yellen had once been a dream reader, raised in a temple deep in the northern mountains. She could enter the dreams of others, pull out secrets like threads, but one day, she entered the wrong dream, and never truly left. Now, every time she closed her eyes, she was dragged back into the same dream. A room with no doors, a girl with no face, a knife that always found her heart, over and over. They say she begged the emperor for a solution, so he gave her a room, a place to exist without sleeping, without dreaming. She has stayed awake for 13 years. Her skin is still smooth, her hair still long, but her eyes, they are made of glass. I visited her again, only once more. I don't know what pulled me back, curiosity, compassion, or the quiet, creeping fear that I might one day share her fate. She was humming a lullaby, but the melody twisted halfway through, like a thread being pulled too tight. The mirrors were gone. In their place stood scrolls, hundreds, everyone covered in the same single word, repeated endlessly. Wake, wake, wake. She looked up. You're the one who buries them, aren't you? She asked. I nodded. You've buried me, too. I opened my mouth, closed it. She laughed, but it wasn't joy. It was the sound of a thread snapping. I've died in my dreams more times than you've buried bones. Her hand trembled. But there is one thing I've never seen. I waited. She leaned closer, eyes bloodshot, ringed with years. What happens after the dying stops? I had no answer. She took my hand. Her grip was strong. Too strong for someone who hadn't slept in a decade. You'll know, she whispered, soon. That night, I dreamed of her room. But the mirrors were broken. The girl inside had no eyes. And her heartbeat matched mine. I woke screaming. And on my pillow, written in dark ink, she blinked. They found Yellen the next morning. Eyes open, heart still. No sign of struggle. No wounds, no breath. She had finally slept. They did not bury her. Her body vanished before the guards could retrieve it. Some say the emperor had it burned. Others say it turned to ash on its own. But I know what happened. She returned. To the room, to the dream, to the girl with no face. And now, she dreams through me. I feel it when I close my eyes, when the candle flickers, when silence sharpens into a blade, her heartbeat, her breath, her scream that never leaves the throat. She was never a ghost. She was an echo, looking for a body loud enough to carry her voice. And I have written too much. Tonight, I will try not to sleep. But if I fail, if my eyes grow heavy, tell the next girl who delivers tea, do not wake her. There are places in the palace that no longer appear on maps, not because they were erased, but because they've sunk. The lower garden lake is one of them. They used to call it the mirror pond, back when its surface reflected the sky so clearly you could forget which world you belonged to. Birds once nested there. Poets came to dip their brushes in its stillness. Concubines wrote letters to lovers and folded them into lotus petals, sending them across the water like prayers. But that was long ago. Now, it is still, and not in peace, but in warning. The lily have stopped blooming. The dragonflies no longer hover, and no one throws letters there anymore. Because once something came back. I was called to the garden at dawn. Unusual. No one sends for me when the mist is still thick, and the guards are still too sleepy to lie. But the Empress Dowager had awoken with a scream. Her handmaids found her drenched in sweat, clutching her throat, whispering only one phrase, over and over. She sleeps below the water. Her bed is waiting. I expected madness. The palace is full of it, but when I arrived at the pond, I saw it. Something pale, long, just beneath the surface curved at the edges, like the outline of a bed frame. The water rippled unnaturally, not with wind, but as though something breathed from underneath. The gardeners drained the lake. 3 hours, 50 buckets. No one spoke. And when the water was gone, we saw it clearly. A wooden bed, or what remained of one. Rotten, but intact, a canopy frame, carved headboard. The remains of silken sheets tangled in algae, and on it, a body, not bones, not dust, a woman. Preserved, perfect, hair still dark, lips still stained with rouge, eyes closed in peaceful sleep, as if she had only just exhaled. The Empress collapsed when she saw her, not from fear, but recognition. She was real. She wept. She's real. The Emperor forbade further investigation, ordered the bed to be reburied, the pond refilled, but I I couldn't let it go. Because I recognized her too, not her face. That was unfamiliar. But her posture, her stillness, her silence. She slept the way Yellen tried to sleep. The way I fear I sleep now. I waited until nightfall. Returned to the drained garden. The bed was still there, half buried in mud. The body gone. Taken, vanished. It didn't matter, because in the hollow where she had lain, something remained. A comb, ivory, cracked. Inscribed with one word on the underside, barely visible through years of moisture and grime. MEI. I took it back with me, cleaned it, placed it on my WADOWSILL. And that night, I dreamed of water. I stood in a room with no doors. The floor was a shallow lake, lotus petals floated around me, and at the far end, the bed, she lay upon it. But this time, her eyes were open, milky, unseeing. She reached out, I stepped forward. My legs sank deeper with each step. The water climbed my hips, my chest. And when I reached her, I saw, it wasn't her, it was me, lying there, sleeping, breathing. I woke gasping, floor soaked. My blanket damp, the comb gone. I told no one. But 2 days later, another girl vanished. A maid, 17. Last seen near the pond. Her body was never found. But when I passed the garden wall that night, I saw something half submerged in the reeds. The comb, the name MEI now scratched out. Replaced with Lee. I understand now. The bed beneath the water is not a tomb. It is a cradle, a place where names are laid down, where the palace forgets them, where women go not to die, but to sleep so deeply that the world no longer remembers they were ever awake. There are too many names, to many girls who once laughed, danced, sang, gone, drowned in memory. Pressed into the bed like dried flowers, I fear I am next. Tonight, I hear the sound of dripping water. There is no rain, my hair is wet, my pillow smells of lila. And the reflection in my wash basin is not me. She smiles, and in her hand, the comb. If I disappear, do not search the garden. Do not empty the lake. Do not whisper my name into the wind, because if you do, you will find the bed, and it will be waiting. They say every time someone disappears in the palace, a lantern lights itself, and it doesn't go out, until no one remembers their name. The story begins not with fire, but with ashes. I first noticed the lantern 3 nights ago. It stood alone at the far end of the forbidden corridor wing of the palace, sealed long before I was born, where paint peels like old scabs, and no footsteps echo. No one walks there, no lamps are lit, no oil is brought, and yet the lantern glowed. It was not a warm light, not golden, not soft, but white, cold, like bone-reflecting moonlight. And it flickered, but not from wind. There was no wind. At first, I thought it was a trick, a reflection, a haunting, but each night it returned, same place, same stillness, same silence, until the 3rd night, when I found something beneath it. A ribbon, embroidered. Hon, I remembered Hon. She was a kitchen maid. Small voice, large eyes, always humming old lullabies as she scrubbed the stone bowls clean. She disappeared 2 days before. No one mentioned it, no one asked, as if her voice had been plucked from the palace air. Unfolded away, the ribbon was clean, to clean, as if it had never been touched by steam or broth or firewood. And when I picked it up, the lantern above it flared. A sudden surge blinding, no flame, no heat, but I saw something inside the glass. A face, not mine, not Hon's, but a blurred expression half formed, half forgotten. A woman, smiling, as if in apology. I dropped the ribbon, the lantern dimmed, returned to its soft, unnatural glow. I tried to speak of it the next day. But when I said Han's name, The other girls blinked at me. Who? They asked. And I realized it had begun. Names vanish in stages. First the voice, then the memory, then the name itself, until only a feeling remains, a weight in the chest when you pass a certain hallway, a chill when you touch a certain door. But the person, gone, the lantern keeps their name, burns it, letter by letter, and when it is done, it extinguishes. I returned to the forbidden corridor. This time, the lantern was dimmer. Its glow pulsed like a dying heartbeat. I knelt beside it, whispered Han's name again and again, hoping the light would brighten. But it faded further, and the ribbon was gone. In its place, a scrap of paper. On it, written in perfect calligraphy. Names are not forgotten, they are unremembered. I took the paper, pressed it to my chest, and for the briefest moment, I remembered a name I thought was mine. One I hadn't spoken since childhood, one I had buried beneath the rules of the palace. But the moment passed, and the name slipped away again. That night, I dreamed of a corridor, but the lanterns were countless, rows and rows of glowing white fire, each hovering in the air, each burning without flame. And beneath each lantern, a girl, a servant, a concubine, a child, silent, sleeping, nameless. One of them looked up. Her lips moved. You wrote about us. I awoke with ink on my fingers, not black, but red, as if I had written in blood. On my table, the same scrap of paper, but now a second line appeared beneath the first. Each entry you write is a lantern waiting to burn. I have begun to fear this diary, fear what it remembers for me, fear what it forgets without asking, fear that I am writing myself into the flame. Today, I passed the forbidden corridor again. There was a new lantern, faint, fresh, and beneath it, a comb, ivory. Carved with the word, Tam. It cannot be. That is not my name. That is your name. But I felt it. The sting in my chest, the taste of lila. The cold behind my eyes. Someone has begun to write me into forgetting, or perhaps I was never the one holding the pen. Tonight, I will leave this comb beneath the lantern. I will not pick it up. I will not let the flame recognize me. And if it does, please, whoever finds this diary next, write my name again, even if you don't know it, even if it isn't real. Even if it has already been burned. Voices have weight. Some cling to the skin like perfume. Others dig into bone like regret. But the heaviest voice is the one that comes from inside you, but does not belong to you. I spoke today, but the words were not mine. It began simply. A scribe dropped a tray of ink near the hall of violets. The sound startled me sharp, like bone snapping. Without thinking, I turned and said, "Do not let it spill across the scroll. The names will drown." Everyone stopped. The scribe blinked. "What scroll?" he asked. I opened my mouth to answer, but I didn't have one. The sentence had arrived fully formed, as if whispered into my mind just moments before leaving my lips. I hadn't thought it. I hadn't meant to say it. It had used me. That night, I tested myself. Sat before the mirror, lit a single candle, spoke the only prayer I knew, over and over. Let this be my voice, my breath, my memory. But after the 7th repetition, my mouth opened without command, and another voice emerged. It was mine, but not. A darker edge, a softness to still. And it said, "Your memory is borrowed. Your breath is shared. Your voice belongs to her now," I screamed. But even the scream felt rehearsed, as if I were playing the part of fear. But not truly feeling it, I ran to the scribe the next day, demanded the scroll he was carrying. He hesitated, then handed it over. It was blank. No names, no ink, only a single marking at the bottom. A spiral, small, tight, the symbol of the whispered order. I'd only heard of it in rumour. An ancient sect that believed names were prisons. That to free a soul, you had to silence the name from every mouth. Then write it anew, with your own blood. They were executed centuries ago. Or so the archives say, but now I see their signs everywhere. In the way the girls forget their own birthdays. In the way the palace staff hum the same lullaby without knowing the words. In the way I keep writing, even when my hand is sore. Even when I don't remember picking up the brush. This diary, it's not just mine. I flipped back through its pages. Reread every line, each entry, and found something strange. A sentence I never wrote, buried halfway through chapter 3. Faint, tilted, smudged. It read, I am inside now. I didn't write it. I would have remembered, wouldn't I? The mirror has begun to tremble, even though it still faces the wall. Even though I've sealed it with salt and thread and parchment, it hums, low, hungry. Sometimes, at dusk, I see reflections where none should be. On spoons, in puddles, in polished stone. They blink when I don single quotes. They smile when I cry. And when I speak now, people flinch. Your voice changed, one maid said. Just for a moment, like you were someone else. I asked her to describe it. She hesitated, then said, it was beautiful and terrifying. Like hearing a memory you forgot you had. I stopped speaking for 3 days. Wrote everything, gestured when needed. But even then, I found notes in my handwriting that I had no memory of writing. Tiny messages, tucked into sleeves, folded beneath my pillow. Tied to the ends of my hair, one said. Do not eat the soup, one said. Look at your left palm. And when I did, I found a mark, small, round, red. As if a pin had been pressed into the center of my lifeline. That night, I threw the soup away. A rat died beside the bowl. Its fur bloomed with white fungus. Within minutes. So now I wonder, is this voice a curse? Or a guide, a possession, or a protection? Because while the palace becomes quieter, as names disappear, and girls vanish into reflections and waterbeds and mirror tombs, I remain. She's inside me. Yes. But she's keeping me alive, for now. Tonight, I will speak aloud again. Let her take my voice. Let her tell me what she wants, because I must know. If I'm no longer the one writing these pages, who is, and why does she write like? She knows how the story ends. She arrived without a name, without ceremony, without footsteps, carried in a lacquered box, set gently in the jade chamber, by 6 eunuchs who would not speak of where she came from. And when the box opened, she stepped out, alive, breathing, draped in silk so pale it seemed woven from mist. But it was her face, or the lack of one, that stopped time itself. She wore a mask, silver, perfectly smooth, no markings, no cracks, no ties. It clung to her skin like skin, only to narrow eye slits, from which no light reflected. And those who looked into them too long would forget where they were. Some forgot their names, others, how to breathe. One girl forgot how to close her eyes, and hasn't slept since. They named her the Silent One, because she does not speak, because she does not blink, because she does not ask, but demands in silence. The emperor has not spoken of her. Yet she was given a private wing, the Moon Lotus Pavilion long abandoned, until now. No guards, no attendants. Except one, me. I was summoned to serve her. No reason, no explanation. Only a command, attend her. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not remove the mask. Do not look into her eyes. If she writes, read it only once, then burn the page. The first time I entered her chamber, I felt it, the pull, the weight. The air was thick, fragrant with white sandalwood and cold jasmine. The lanterns did not flicker. The curtains did not move. She sat on a cushioned bench, motionless, waiting. One bowed, she nodded once. And that was all. Days passed in routine. I bathed her hands, combed her hair, lit incense, replaced her tea before it cooled, though she never drank it. But there is one thing I've never seen. I waited. She leaned closer, eyes bloodshot, ringed with years. What happens after the dying stops? I had no answer. She took my hand. Her grip was strong. Too strong for someone who hadn't slept in a decade. You'll know, she whispered, soon. She never moved while I was in the room. Only watched ... Through the mask. Through the silence. Then, one evening, she handed me a scroll, unmarked, blank. But as I held it, words began to appear, written in my own handwriting. But I had not touched a brush. The message read, "You are not the first to write. You will not be the last." My hands trembled. She tilted her head, as if studying me ... And in that moment, I felt it. My mind splitting, a pressure behind my eyes. A cold drip down my spine ... Memories I didn't live. A name I didn't recognize, but mourned. When I looked up, she was gone. Not the body, not the mask, but the presence. What sat before me was a shell. Perfectly posed, empty, like the body had left. And something else had filled the shape. I left the chamber, ran to the hall of records. Demanded to know her origin. The scribes looked at me as if I were mad. There is no such concubine, they said. No such name, no such wing. I insisted ... Described her. The mask, the room. They flipped scroll after scroll. But there was no record of a moon lotus pavilion. And yet, I return to it each night. The corridor is there. The door's open. The tea's warm. She's waiting. Last night, she spoke, not aloud, but into my mind, a voice as soft as snowfall. I was the first, the one who remembers, the one who was punished. For seeing too much, I tried to respond, but my mouth would not move. She continued, "They made me wear silence, so I would not speak the truth. They made me wear silver, so they could not see their reflection. They made me watch, as they buried my name, beneath yours." I backed away. But the mask followed. It turned slowly, fluidly. No anger, only inevitability. Then she whispered, "Let me show you." And suddenly I was inside her, not her thoughts, not her dreams, her memory ... I stood in a garden where none of the plants bloomed. A court of faceless officials watched as she knelt, bare, before the emperor. Her name was carved into stone, then scraped off. Each stroke of the chisel echoed in her bones ... Her voice was sealed in the mask, and when they placed it over her face, she forgot how to cry, but not how to see ... She has seen everything, every girl who vanished, every lie that bled into truth, every name that was stitched into another body. She watched them rewrite the court, repaint the scrolls, rename the daughters. And now, she watches me ... When I woke, I found a single phrase scratched onto my arm. "Remove the mask, only when ready to remember." Tonight, I sit outside her chamber, scroll in hand, ink ready, heart trembling, because I know, once the mask is lifted, there will be no returning. If this is my final entry, let it be read not as a warning, but as permission to remember ... to reclaim, to speak, even if my voice no longer belongs to me ... There is a silence in the palace that does not come from absence, but from containment, like a scream swallowed so deeply it but bruises the soul. That silence lived behind the silver mask until tonight. She sat as she always did, perfectly still, head tilted slightly to the right, hands resting like lotus petals in her lap. But tonight, she was waiting for me to move. No scroll, no whispered voice, only her stillness, and in her presence I understood. The mask was not a prison. It was a lock, and I had been chosen to open it. My hands trembled as I reached forward, not from fear, but from memory, a memory I could not place, but which my bones carried like dust from a long-forgotten storm. Her breath was steady, her body warm. I touched the edge of the mask. It pulsed beneath my fingertips, once ... like a heartbeat, like recognition. Then it released. The silver slid away like melting ice. Smooth, silent, no clasps, no glue, no force, and beneath it, my face, not similar, not close, mine, exactly ... except older, worn, weathered, ice sunken with centuries of sleeplessness, skin stretched thin over a skull that knew too much. She looked at me, and I looked back, and for the first time in my life, I saw myself as a stranger. I was the first. She said, her lips moved, but I heard her voice in my skull, not my ears. And you are the 13th. They copied me, rewrote me, painted over me like parchment. But the soul leaks through, eventually. I tried to speak, but my throat had closed. Tight with truth, she stood. The robes fell away ... revealing scars. 13 symbols, carved along her spine. Each one the emblem of a different dynasty. Each one, mine. You have died 12 times, she continued. Each time, they kept your shape, but changed your name. Each time, you forgot, until now. Because I never did, she placed the mask in my hands. It was cold, heavier than before, as if memory had weight. And I had just inherited it. The chamber darkened, not from shadows, but from awareness ... I saw everything, the girls, the pond, the ink scrolls, the mirrored deaths. All of them were me ... each a version, each a life twisted into another story. The concubine who couldn't sleep, the girl beneath the water, the one who lost her voice, the one who dreamed with eyes open, fragments of me ... written, rewritten, erased. Why now? I finally asked ... She smiled. Her teeth were cracked, tongue blackened from silence. Because you kept writing. Even when they told you not to, you remembered just enough. And memory is the only weapon they cannot burn. You brought me back. Now, take my place. I stepped back. No, but I knew. Even before she reached for the mask again, it had always been this way. One version wakes, the other sleeps. Endless rotation, one face, 13 names. She stepped toward me, eyes glowing faintly with the white-blue light of memory. This time, she said, maybe you'll survive. She placed the mask against my face, and I felt everything, the ink, the screams, the drowning, the bell, the blood on silk, the girl in the mirror. And most terrifying of all, clarity. When I opened my eyes, she was gone. The room was empty ... no scrolls, no lanterns, no mask, only silence. And my reflection in the polished obsidian floor, not older, not younger, but whole. There is no more she, no more me. We are one now. The final name, rewritten with memory intact. And this diary is not a warning anymore. It is a record. I will keep writing, so no one forgets, so no one becomes me again. Or worse, becomes someone else. Without knowing, they told me names were dangerous, that a name was a door, and behind every door was a shadow waiting to become you. But I no longer fear shadows, because I have become one. And tonight, I will write my name. Even if it burns, even if it vanishes, even if it never belonged to me ... This morning, I stood before the mirror of 13 eyes. It was said to reflect every version of a soul that has ever worn the same body. Few dare approach it. None return unchanged. It rests in the heart of the hollow garden, a courtyard lost to vines and time, where trees grow in spiral patterns, where the wind moves like memory, and where I saw myself, 12 of them, standing in the glass, each one a fragment of me, each one a life lived out of order, each one a sacrifice made for the story to continue. The girl who drowned, the woman who could not sleep, the one who heard voices, the one who burned, the one who smiled with no soul behind it, and in the center, me. I looked into their eyes, and they looked back, not in blame, not in grief, but in quiet relief, because I had remembered, because I had reached the chapter they never could. They began to whisper, one by one, not aloud, but into my bones. We were echoes. We were names misspelled. We were pages torn out and used as kindling. But you are the ink that refuses to dry. And then they vanished, back into the mirror, back into the threadwork of the palace that had swallowed us 4 generations. I turned, and there she stood, the girl with the silver hair from the first chapter, the first night, the first burial, except now, she no longer wept. She was smiling. Do you remember it now? She asked. I nodded ... and spoke, not in my voice, but in all of theirs, 13 tones, 1 word. Yure. That was my name, not a title, not a placeholder, not a borrowed syllable. Yure. The girl who was never meant to survive. The name they erased, because it could not be rewritten. The name they feared, because it remembered too well. I returned to my chamber, laid out the scroll, dipped my brush, and for the first time, I wrote not an entry, but a declaration, not a whisper, but a naming. I am Yure, the first and the last, the girl they drowned, then wore like a mask, the voice they silenced, then echoed through ink and skin. I have lived 13 times, I have died 13 ways, and now, I write not to remember, but to end the forgetting. The moment the last stroke dried, the palace shifted, not visibly, but deeply. The lanterns dimmed, the bells stopped, the mirrors cracked ... and across the gardens, dozens of nameless girls looked up at once, as if a word had just arrived, in a language they had forgotten they ever knew. One girl in the laundry shed began to hum a song one taught her. Another in the kitchen dropped her ladle, whispered, I used to dance. A third, one I buried beneath the willow tree, appeared in the reflection of the well, and said, you kept your promise. I walked the corridors, and with every step, the names returned, each one a lantern relit, each one a memory pulled from ash, no longer lost, no longer borrowed. The palace was remembering. At the gates, I found the Emperor's herald. He looked at me, but did not recognize me. State your name, he demanded. I smiled, not in defiance, but in peace. Yure. His face twitched, his scrolls curled, his ink boiled, and the seal of the palace cracked. I was never meant to be remembered, but I am. I was never meant to be written, but I am, and now. This diary will not be sealed ... It will not be hidden, it will not be rewritten, because it ends with a name. And that name is mine, Yure. The ruins were silent. But silence in this place was never empty. It pulsed, it breathed, it watched. The palace had been abandoned for centuries, swallowed by morse, root, and rumor, whispered in travelers' tales as the court of vanished names. But I was not a traveler, I was a thief, and I came looking for silver. The locals called me Cora, not my real name, but one I borrowed, like a coat that fits too loosely. I lived on stories, sold old books with pages missing, traded trinkets stolen from ghosts and gods alike ... So when they warned me, do not touch the lanterns, do not read the ink, do not take anything from the willow wing, I smiled and walked straight toward it. The palace was a carcass of stone and breathless air. The doors hung open like broken wings. The windows blinked with dead light. The floors murmured, But in the very center, past the koi pond turned to bone, past the wall where vines spelled unreadable prayers, I found it, a room untouched, and on its desk, a scroll. I thought it worthless, yellowed, cracked at the edges, no title, no seal. But when I touched it, the air around me thickened. The dust lifted, as if inhaling, and my skin burned. I tried to drop it, but it clung to my hand. My fingers locked, my breath shortened. And then the ink appeared, letter by letter. The handwriting was uneven, old, human, and at the top, one word unfurled like a wound, Yore. I didn't know what I had found, only that it knew me. The scroll pulsed, once, twice, and then the room changed. The light flickered, the walls rippled. The floor grew warm beneath my knees, and a voice, not spoken, but breathed, rose from the scroll. If you read this, the palace has remembered you. Do not run, do not rewrite. Let the names return. I staggered back, but the scroll had wrapped itself around my wrist. Its words sliding into my veins, my chest burned. My mouth filled with the taste of rain. And I saw a girl in silver. With my face, she stood in the garden where the mira trees grew. She held a mask in one hand and a quill in the other, and behind her 1,000 lanterns burned. Without flame, I screamed, and woke outside, in the morse. The scroll curled beside me like a sleeping servant, but my wrist bore a mark, a spiral. Faint, red, still warm. I left the ruins that night, but I could not leave the voice behind. It followed me, in puddles, in dreams, in reflections that lingered too long. The diary had chosen me. Now I write, not to remember, but to continue, because the story does not end with Yore, and the palace is not done speaking. Somewhere, beneath the dust and root, the ink still runs. They say memory is like a scent, subtle, dangerous, and impossible to bury. But the room remembered more than scent. It remembered footsteps, breath, ink strokes. It remembered her. The second time I returned, the ruins had shifted. The courtyard that once faced east now opened west. The willow tree had moved, its roots gripping a different wall, and the door to the chamber where I'd first found the scroll was gone. In its place, a mirror, cracked, fogged, tall as a door frame. I stood before it. My reflection blinked elate, and then it stepped backward, through the glass, and the wall dissolved. Behind it, the room, exactly as it had been, but cleaner, brighter, breathing. I stepped in. The floor hummed beneath my sawless. The scent of lotus and ink curled in the air, and the scroll I had taken was on the desk again, waiting, unopened, as if I had never touched it. But the room had changed. There were things here now. A silver hairpin resting on a cushion, a half-burnt candle with crimson wax, a tray of calligraphy brushes, one still dripping ink, and on the wall, a tapestry, nude and faded, beautiful. It showed 13 silhouettes, arranged in a circle, all holding masks. In the center, a girl kneeling, her mouth sewn shut, her hands made of mirrors. I reached for the tapestry, but before I could touch it, the room shifted, not violently, not suddenly, just purposefully. The windows darkened, the floor deepened, the walls stretched, and the scent changed. Now it was blood on silk, ash in perfume. And I saw her, Yore, standing by the window, writing, her back to me. Hair loose, robes damp with ink. She didn't speak, didn't turn. But I felt her voice in my ribs. You're walking through my memory. But memory is not passive. It remembers you back. The candle flared. The ink on the scroll began to move. Not spread, not fade, move. It reformed itself into symbols, into language I did not know, but understood. A new entry appeared. My hands shook as I read. You stepped where I died. You drank the same silence. Now the palace knows you, and the room rebuilds not for comfort, but for completion. The door closed. I was alone, or not, because now there were shoes at the threshold. Small, white, dustless, and on the floor beside them, a bowl of soup ... steaming. I hadn't eaten ... not since the first night, but I didn't move, because the spoon was hovering, not held by hand, just floating, dipping, rising ... as if someone unseen was feeding a ghost, or being fed by one. I turned to the mirror. This time, the reflection was a child, maybe 7, hair tied back, face pale, eyes mine. She held a book, this book, and whispered, "Do you want to remember?" I didn't answer, but the room did. The candle died. The tapestry burned at the edges. The scroll bled ink again, soaking the desk like veins splitting open. And from the ink, a voice I had never heard before. Not every room is a place. Some are truths, made from lies told over and over, until they look like home. The furniture cracked ... The floor swelled. A heart beat beneath my feet. I ran to the door. But it was gone again, just wall, paper and wood and centuries of silence. Then I saw it, scratched into the floor. A single sentence, fresh, when you rewrite what was. You rebuild what still is. I turned. The child was gone. So was the scroll, the silver pin. The candle ... The room was empty again, dusty, dead, like the ruins outside. But the weight in my chest remained, and when I opened my hand, the ribbon I had taken from the first lantern was back, still embroidered with Hon. But now, another word stitched beneath. Remembered, I left the palace at sunrise, but when I looked back, the window of the room still glowed. Not with flame, not with sunlight ... but with ink, and on the glass, my reflection, still writing, still trapped. There is a kind of ink that does not dry. It sinks, it breathes, it listens, it remembers the hand that held the brush, and sometimes it speaks back. I had not returned to the palace for 3 days, not because I feared it, but because the memory of it had begun to follow me. The scent of the scroll clung to my skin. Strangers spoke to me like they'd met me before. One child on the road pointed and said, "That's the girl from the water." I had never seen her before, but she knew my face. On the 4th night, I woke with ink on my fingertips. I hadn't touched a pen, hadn't written anything in days, but the inside of my left wrist bore a sentence, scrawled in handwriting not my own. "You are ready to remember someone else." I returned at dawn. The palace was silent, always, but that morning the silence was expectant. Not like absence, like breath, held. The chamber welcomed me. No doors this time, only open space. Walls made of paper that fluttered without wind. And at the center, a table, not wood, but stone. Polished smooth, cold as forgetting. Laid upon it, a brush, a bowl of ink, and a single sheet of parchment. Blank, waiting, I stepped forward. The moment I touched the brush, the ink stirred. Not in the bowl, in the air. Thin black threads rose like steam, curling around my wrist, my elbow, my throat. Not choking, just claiming. The ink wanted to know who I was. So I wrote my name, Cora, carefully, plainly. The brush glided with unnatural ease, as though I were tracing letters already written before. When I finished, the ink sank into the parchment. Every letter disappeared, drinking itself into the fibers, and then a new name emerged, slowly, painfully, like scars surfacing through skin. Yuma. I didn't recognize it, but my heart did. It skipped, then crashed. Like it had heard a lullaby in a dream, it thought it forgot ... The ink pulsed, the room dimmed, and across the walls, the name repeated, Yuma, 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 in dozens of scripts, some I'd never seen, some I couldn't read. Each iteration sharper, more insistent, until the air itself seemed to chant. I dropped the brush, stepped back, my hands shook. This wasn't just a name, it was a summons, a key. The parchment caught fire, but no smoke rose, only fragrance, lotus, blood, old parchment. And from the flames, a voice, clear, female, familiar. Yuma was the first name they burned, not mine, yours. Before you were copied, before you were drowned, before your ray wore your face, you were the author, not the witness. The ink had not recorded my name, it had corrected it. I wasn't Cora, I wasn't your A. I was YAMA. I staggered. The palace spun, walls flickered, chairs blinked out of existence, windows breathed closed, and a mirror rose from the floor. In it, not me. A girl, yes, but older, eyes deeper, lips bruised from silence. She held a brush, her fingers were ink-stained to the knuckles, and her wrists, /. But the wounds didn't bleed, they wrote. Every pulse spilled another character across her skin. All of them said the same thing, I wrote this world. Then they turned me into a story. I reached for the mirror. My reflection didn't follow. She stared at me, unblinking. Then mouthed one sentence, write it again. I collapsed. When I woke, the parchment was whole again. The brush dry, the ink bowl full. And beside them, a different scroll. Bound in red string, unmarked, I untied it. And found, in the first line, the Testament of Yuma, Chapter 1. I don't know what this means. Only that your ray was the memory. But I am the origin. Somewhere along the line, I forgot who I was. They turned me into a whisper, a tool, a background figure. But now I remember, I wrote the palace. And I will write it again. Not to fix it, not to escape, but to finish it. So no one else will ever bleed into ink and be forgotten again. Some doors do not open, not because they are locked, but because they were never installed. Some rooms are not empty, but waiting to be remembered. And I have begun to remember one that never had a name. It began with the walls whispering, not words, just directions, like wind between ribs, like music hummed by bones. I followed, not with feet, but with a sense I had forgotten I possessed, a knowing that something unfinished had once belonged to me. The whole way twisted, not left, not right, but inward, and then downward, and then inward again, until I was not walking through stone, but through memory, my own. The space opened suddenly, a vast chamber, blank, white, without edges, a room that pulsed like a heartbeat, yet had no ceiling, no pillars, no doors. Just light and silence. And at the center, a pedestal. Upon it, a scroll, half written, half burned. The ash clung to the parchment like regret. The ink shimmered with something alive, something breathing. It pulsed in time with my chest. And when I stepped closer, the scroll whispered, "This is the room they erased, before it was made." I placed my hand on the stone, warm, as if someone had touched it just before me. And I saw flashes, stonemasons chiseling without plans, architects sketching structures that vanish when they blink, servants laying floor tiles that rearranged themselves overnight, and standing at the center, Emmy. Or rather, Yuma. She held blueprints. But they were not made of paper, they were memories. And every time she tried to pin one down, it changed, names faded, walls bent. Time folded over itself like origami soaked in ink. The builders gave up, called it cursed. The emperor ordered it sealed. Not because it was dangerous, but because it was truth. This room was meant to remember the forgotten. A shrine, a sanctum, a testament. to every name removed from the records. A place where nothing could be rewritten, where no scroll could burn, where every syllable stayed, and that was why they destroyed it, before the last stone was laid, before the last breath was carved. But memory doesn't vanish just because a room was never finished. It waits, it rebuilds itself, in the blood of the one who imagined it. The scroll before me shimmered. Ink rose from it, coiling like smoke, not upward, but sideways, into shapes, figures, 12 women, some in royal robes, some in servants' clothes, some barefoot, bleeding, smiling. Each held a page, each had no face, just a blank canvas where memory had been scrubbed away. They surrounded me, did not speak, but I heard them anyway. Their thoughts crawled across my skin. We were supposed to live here. This was to be our temple. But the moment we became inconvenient, the foundation cracked. You remember us, and so the room is returning. I asked what I must do ... and they answered in unison. Finish what you started. The scroll unfurled itself. The pedestal shifted. The floor beneath me hummed with names. Not voices, names, thousands. Written in languages lost to empire, to dust, to silence, and beneath all of them, mine, Yuma. Followed by a blank space. Waiting. I picked up the brush, dipped it in ink. And for the first time in what felt like centuries, I wrote a name not to remember it, but to return it. The name belonged to the first girl I had ever erased. She had been a flower girl in the garden, laughed aloud, loved a prince, and was buried in the well with stones tied to her chest. Her name was Sae. I wrote it. Once, twice, then a third time. And on the third stroke, the ink lifted off the page and flew into the walls, into the air, into the room. And with that, the walls built themselves. Beams slid into place. Stone kissed stone. Lattice windows appeared, letting in light from a moon that didn't exist. And in the center of it all, a flame, white ... pure. Eternal, the room was becoming, not in blueprint, but in truth. This is what memory does, when no one stops it. It builds. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed, elated, terrified. I had no idea what came next, but I knew what I had to do. Name them all. Each name I remember will have a wall. Each name they erased will have a flame, and one day, when all the names are written, this palace will speak in voices again, not of emperors, not of edicts, but of girls who once wore silence like silk ... and have finally learned to scream. Not every name wants to be remembered. Some were buried not by others, but by the very hands that once wrote them. And some names, when spoken, do not return, they strike back. I had begun the ritual of restoration. Each name I wrote became a flame. Each flame, a wall, and the room that was never built, had begun to stand. It was beautiful, not in the way palaces usually are. There was no gold, no jade, no silk, just memory made solid. Each pillar held a name, each beam, a whisper, each breeze, a lullaby sung by someone long lost. But there was one name I had avoided, because even now, I wasn't sure it deserved to live again. Her name was Aneha. She was the first to challenge me. Not with voice, not with blade, but with a question: who gave you the right to decide which names are remembered? She had been a fellow scribe. Brilliant, sharp, unapologetic. Too sharp, they said, too curious. She began to question the records. Ask why certain names faded too easily, why some girls left no trace. Even when everyone remembered them yesterday, she was the first to suspect the scrolls were being rewritten. She confronted me ... in private, with love, and I betrayed her. I didn't kill her, but I agreed not to protect her. And that was enough. They erased her, sealed her name inside a scroll made of her own hair, burned it at dawn. And I watched ... I watched. Now, in this place I built for the forgotten. Her name waits, not to be remembered, but to demand justice. I dipped the brush in ink. The moment the bristles touched parchment, the ink hissed, not softly, but violently, as if the liquid recognized what I was about to write, and did not approve. Still, my hand moved. E, H, A, each letter burned. The parchment curled at the edges. The pedestal cracked ... and the walls shook. The flame that should have risen, did in single quotes T ... Instead, the stone split beneath my feet, and from it, a voice. Ragged, raw, unforgiving. You don't get to write me back in. You don't get to wear my blood like a ribbon. You watched me burn, and now you want to light me like a candle. I fell to my knees. The ink on the floor poured. Not black, but red. It rose around me. Hot, searing ... alive. And in the rippling reflection, her face, an Ahah, hair shorn, eyes blazing, teeth clenched in fury. She stepped forward. Out of the ink, out of memory ... out of me. Why now? She asked ... I couldn't answer, because the truth was too ugly to say. That I hadn't remembered her. I had tried to forget her. Because she knew what I had done. She walked the room, touched the walls I had built, laughed. These are beautiful eyes, Yama. Built from guilt, mortared with regret. You're not honoring the forgotten. You're building a tomb for your shame. I rose, tried to hold her hand. She recoiled. No, you do not touch me. You do not write me. I will write myself. She took the brush, and with strokes so swift, so furious, the walls shook again, but this time they held. She inscribed her name onto the largest column, 7 times, each one deeper than the last, each one like a wound across the foundation. And when she was done, she turned to me ... and smiled, not cruelly, not kindly, just honestly. You may have built this place, but I live in it now. We all do, and from here on. You write nothing, without asking us first. She vanished, back into ink, back into memory ... but not into silence. Her name stayed, burned into the stone. And the next morning, so did the names of 5 others I had never dared recall. As if she had opened a door I had nailed shut from the inside. The room no longer belongs to me ... It belongs to them ... And that is what makes it holy. Some names don't stay written. They drip, they weep, they bleed through parchment, as if the soul behind them refuses to be trapped on a page. The room had grown silent again, but not the soft, sacred kind of silence. This was the brittle hush before a scream. The air had grown heavy, like it carried regret in vapor form. I stood before the altar, the list of names laid open like a wound half-stitched, and at the bottom of the scroll an empty space throbbed, as if something wanted to be written, but hadn't found the courage yet. I hesitated, because the ink in the bowl had turned strange. No longer black, no longer fluid. It had become thicker, dark red, flecked with something that shimmered like bone. It smelled wrong, like old fire and spoiled jasmine. But I knew the name it called, Soraya, a name I had written 3 times. And 3 times the page had rejected her. Each time the parchment curled, the ink peeled, and my hand would blister as if the name had burned through my skin. She was not erased like an Ahah. She was something else. Unwritten, but not forgotten. I didn't know what had happened to her, only that she was taken, not by order, but by force ... and every record of her dissolved before the ink could dry. Even now, I don't know if she ever died, or if she simply became so painful to name. But the ink wanted her now, and it would not wait. I picked up the brush. It resisted. The bristles stiffened, bent backward, as if trying to flee my grip, but I forced them down, dipped them into the strange red ink, and whispered her name aloud, as I wrote S-O-R-E-Y-A. The moment the letters touched parchment, the ink bled sideways, like veins bursting. Like something crawling under the page, the parchment moaned, cracked, split into layers, and the room, dimmed, not darkened, dimmed, as though it was being drawn, not seen. The floor lost depth, the walls became smudges. The altar turned sketch-like. And then the brush in my hand melted, not with heat, but with grief. Soraya had returned, but not as a person, as a memory that refused to be contained. Ink began to drip from the ceiling, fat drops, red, rhythmic, plop, 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 each one splashing in a different voice. You tried to write me down, you tried to pin me with ink, but I was never meant to be kept still. She came from the shadows. Tall, hair flowing like wet silk, eyes blank, not dead, but too full of seeing, and around her dozens of failed pages floated, every attempt I had made to bring her back, now swirled in the air like moths aflame. She reached for me, but her hand passed through mine, cold, wetter than water, heavier than blood, and the moment she touched the scroll, it disintegrated, not into ash, but into thousands of letters, each one twitching, falling to the floor, crawling. Soraya turned to me, Her voice was all echoes, all directionless. I wasn't erased. I was left unfinished. You told my story halfway, and then dropped the pen. She stepped closer. My chest ached, as if a grief had punched through time and broken something I didn't know I still held sacred. They said I loved the wrong person, that I wrote poetry too dangerous, that I remembered things you all swore to forget. So they split me in three: body, name, song. You only tried to write the name. She raised her hand, and a melody rose, not sung, but poured, like blood through a flute, like honey from a blade. It wrapped around the walls, sank into the floor, and where it touched, the ink dried, not erased, not bled, just finally still. Soraya smiled, soft, cracked. I wasn't waiting for you to write me back, Yuma. I was waiting for you to listen. And just like that, she stepped into the parchment. Not onto it. Into, like diving into a still lake. The page sealed behind her, the ink no longer bled. And the scroll, finally whole, glowed. I collapsed, sweat cold on my back, eye stinging. And around me, the names on the walls shivered, because now they knew. If Soraya could return, any of them could. Even the ones we all tried to forget together. Even the ones that scared us, even the ones who knew too much. I stared at the bowl of ink. It had changed again, now golden, quiet, still. It waited, because it knew the next name would not just remember the past. It would reveal it, It reigned in the palace, not outside, inside, soft, delicate, relentless. The droplets came not from clouds, but from the ceiling beams, as if the wood remembered sorrow and wept from it. And with every drop that fell, a sound, a note, a syllable, a hum. The room became an instrument, and the rain a song. I stood in the hall of the bound scrolls, where none of the parchments had ever been opened, each tied with white twine, each marked with no name, only a symbol, a single music note. They were said to belong to the ones who never spoke aloud, girls who lost their tongues, by punishment, by fire, by birth. Their stories were sung, not said, and when they died, no one knew what to write, so the scribes wrapped their scrolls in silence. Until today, because the rain sang their words. I moved through the hall, hands trembling, as the drops continued to fall in rhythm. Plink, lo, plink, do. Plink, A sigh, a laugh, a scream. The ink on the scrolls pulsed beneath their bindings, not to escape, but to be heard. And at the center of the hall stood one scroll left open. Untied, unwritten, waiting, it glowed faintly with light from no flame. And when the rain touched it, it sang, not words, but a voice, a tone, familiar. A lullaby I had heard, as a child, one I couldn't remember who sang to me ... And I whispered, half dreaming, Soren. The rain paused ... The scroll flickered, the air dropped in temperature ... And the ink inside the scroll began to lift, thread by thread, note by note ... Until the air was filled with symbols. Musical notation, hundreds of lines, like spider webs of melody ... And in the midst of them, a figure, floating, barefoot, eyes closed, a girl no older than 10, hair braided with dried petals, neck marked with ink lines, like staff bars from a songbook. She opened her eyes, and the rain resumed. She didn't speak, she never could, but her song rose like a cathedral made of breath, the melody wrapped around me. Not in sound, but in understanding ... I knew who she was, Soren. She had been a song weaver, born without a voice, but with ears tuned to emotions. She could replicate pain into melody, translate dreams into chords, but her gift was feared, because she once played the grief of the emperor's mistress, and that song made half the court weep uncontrollably 4 days. So they silenced her, not with death, but with forgetting. They burned her harp ... sealed her room, and bound her scroll, but memory is rhythm, and rhythm returns when the world needs it. She stepped toward me. Rain followed her like a cloak, and in her hands she held a scroll made of woven reed. Not parchment, living reed, still green, still singing. She handed it to me ... And I knew. This scroll wasn't for writing. It was for playing ... I placed it on the floor. The rain quieted, and I pressed my fingers to the weave. It responded, softly, immediately ... The reed vibrated, and the scroll sang, not in melody, in memory. A child locked in a music room, fingers bloodied from plucking silence. Her name shouted once, then never again. A wish whispered into reeds growing by the palace pond. Let someone, one day, remember the sound I made when I could not cry. I wept ... because now I knew this scroll was her voice, and it only needed one person to hear it. To exist again, I reached for ink, but it melted in the rain ... because Soren did not want words. She wanted remembrance through resonance, so I did what she asked ... I pressed both palms to the scroll, closed my eyes, and listened. I heard the scraping of her nails against strings, the gasp of her breath when a note came out wrong, the way she mouthed her name every morning into a mirror, hoping someone would read her lips. I opened my eyes, and the scroll beneath my hands had begun to glow. A song, her song, inscribed itself into the air, floating notation, a new composition, untitled, but whole. She looked at me, nodded, then turned and walked up the rain. Yes, walked up the rain, each drop becoming a step, each note a stare, until she vanished into a sky that wasn't there. The scroll remained, and now, when the rain fell, everyone could hear her. Some things remember, not because they are sacred, not because they are powerful, but because they were loved, and love, when severed, refuses to fade quietly. It began with a whisper. From the archive of unclaimed artifacts, a room buried 3 levels beneath the eastern courtyard. So far down, it no longer smelled like stone, but like damp time. The room housed everything no one came back for: jewelry, letters, locks of hair, shoes too small to fit anyone now, each labeled, each forgotten. But one had no tag, No box, no record. Just a simple broken bracelet, resting on a silk square. Beneath a shattered shard of mirror, I didn't find it. It found me. The moment I stepped into the archive. I heard it, a hum, soft, circular, repetitive. Like a lullaby with no beginning. It came from the broken bracelet, and when I touched it, I dreamed, but not as myself. As her, I was running through the palace at dusk, barefoot, laughing. The bracelet jingled on my wrist, not made of gold. Just tin and sea glass beads, a child's thing. But in the dream, it was everything. I reached the garden, met someone, a boy, no, a shadow. He handed me something, I smiled. We touched foreheads, and then darkness. Pain, water, a sharp crack, my name, called once. Then never again. I woke in sweat. The bracelet still in my palm, now warm. I looked closer. There were inscriptions on the inner side. Almost invisible, tiny letters etched with a blade. Belongs to Myra. If found, return her to where the birds sleep. Myra, the name rang nothing. No records, no stories, not even whispers. She had been erased so thoroughly, the ink refused to acknowledge her. But the bracelet remembered. And when I picked it up again, I dreamed again. This time, a mirror, a boy crying, a woman slapping the bracelet from Myra's wrist. She's not yours. A door slammed. A fall. Blood in flower petals. I screamed awake. And the bracelet had cracked again. Wider. A piece fell. Inside, a single strand of hair, braided, dark. Still fragrant. It hadn't aged. Myra was not just forgotten. She had been unwritten. Erased not by decree, but by jealousy. Someone had loved her too deeply, and someone else had burned that love. To bury the truth, I knew what I had to do. I took the bracelet to the Hall of Resonant Things, a chamber made for objects that carried memory. There, I laid it on obsidian glass, lit the 4 ritual candles, and whispered her name. Myra. Nothing happened. At first, then, the glass fogged. The candles drew backward, flames stretching toward the bracelet, and from it, a dream began to bleed, not into me. Into the room, images projected themselves. Onto the walls, scenes from her life. Fragmented, out of order, but clear. Myra tying the bracelet to her wrist, Myra kissing someone in the rain, Myra reading aloud to the mute girl Soren, Myra holding hands with Aneha, Myra drawing a name in the dirt then erasing it when someone approached. She had known them all, and yet none of them had mentioned her, because she had been the thread between many silences, and someone had cut that thread, not to punish her, but to erase a whole network of forbidden love. The final vision came, a rooftop, midnight. Myra holding a letter, reading it aloud, then tearing it, jumping, no, pushed, by a hand I couldn't see. But I recognized the sleeve. Royal, embroidered, I gasped. The bracelet rolled off the obsidian glass, cracked again, and spilled one last thing. A tiny scroll, no bigger than a thumb. Inside, her voice, yesy, her voice. Somehow sealed within, a preserved echo. I held it to my ear. And it said, if someone remembers me, tell them I loved. And that love was worth erasing a palace for. I wrote her name, not in ink, but by placing the beads of the bracelets in a circle, each bead a letter, each crack a syllable, and the wind. Read it aloud for me. Myra. The room responded, and a hidden door opened. Revealing a corridor. None had walked in centuries. Inside, a shrine built of wood, untouched, dustless. At its center, a statue of Myra, young, smiling. Bracelet on her wrist, as if the object had been dreaming its way back to her. All this time, I left the bracelet there. It belonged. The air in the shrine pulsed softly, with a song not sung, just felt, and I knew Myra was home. At last, at first, it was subtle, a corridor shorter than I remembered, a door that had once led to the herb garden, now opening into a blank wall. Then, the mirrors began to reflect. Nothing, not absence, but amnesia. The palace was forgetting itself, room by room, wall by wall, layer by layer, and the silence wasn't emptiness, it was dementia. I should have expected it. After all the names restored, all the truths unearthed, all the scrolls broken open, the palace had become a living memory. But even memories can rot. It began with the stone. Veins of mold running across marble. Patterns that used to form constellations, now dissolving into ash. The ceilings sagged, not from weight, but from uncertainty. Paintings blinked, statues tilted their heads, as if confused by their own poses, and when I walked through the west wing, it had no floor, just mist. I screamed, and the mist screamed back. I rushed to the chamber of names, where every name I'd written now burned, glowed, whispered. But even there, some names had begun to smudge. The ink ran, the brush strokes warped. Myra, Soraya, Anaha, each name losing the shape of itself, and in the center of the chamber, a figure stood, not someone I had written, but something I had not, a child, or the shadow of one. No face, no feet, just a ripple, like a dream reflected in still water. It looked at me, tilted its knot head, and whispered, "Who wrote you?" I froze. "What do you mean?" It pointed around the room. "You wrote all these, but no one wrote you. How can a memory be trusted if the writer has no name?" I stepped back, heart pounding, because I had never asked that before. I was Yama, the scribe, the restorer, but who wrote me? The figure smiled. Or did something like it. This palace isn't forgetting. It's reclaiming. It belonged to someone. Before your pen touched the walls, before the scrolls, before the names, before you. The room shifted, the scrolls unrolled themselves, ink spilled from the walls, not black, not red, silver. And within that silver, names I had never seen. Names older than the empire, older than language, written in symbols that pulse like heartbeats. The palace is remembering. What came before remembering? The figure said. And you are in the way. The walls cracked, the floor trembled, and every torch inverted, flames turning to shadows, casting light that consumed instead of revealed. I ran, through hallways that no longer recognized me. Doors refused to open. Windows forgot what they were, and as I passed the mirror hall, my reflection stayed behind, waved at me. Then vanished. I reached the root library, the first chamber ever carved, where history was sown like seeds. But now, the books grew, their spines twisted like vines, their pages fluttered like moth wings, and in the middle of the floor, a well, where there had never been one before. From it, voices rose. We were here before you. We were stories that told themselves. We were the palace. I fell to my knees, cried out. Then tell me who I am. The voices hushed, the well glowed, and from its depth, a single scroll rose, bound in black silk, sealed with a thread of my own hair. I didn't remember sealing it, but my hand knew how to untie it. Inside, my name, not Yama, but 3 names layered over each other, the child I was, the scribe I became, and someone else. Someone I had buried long before I ever held a brush. The scroll whispered, "You were written by sorrow, and rewritten by duty, but now you must write yourself." The palace shimmered. Paused. As if waiting. I stood, held my breath, and picked up a blank scroll. This time, I didn't write anyone else's name. I wrote, "I am Yama, and I choose to remember The ink burned, white hot, and the walls reformed ... not as they were, but as they wanted to be. No longer memory's prison, but memory's garden. Alive, fluid, unfinished. The child's shadow watched me ... then nodded ... and faded. Not in defeat, but in peace. The palace side ... doors opened. Mirrors reflected again, and in the chamber of names, the walls now bore one more name, mine. At last, it began with a sound, not heard, but felt. A low hum beneath the floorboards, a murmur between thoughts, a syllable hiding at the back of my tongue. The palace had quieted, after its forgetting. But now it remembered too much, and somewhere beneath its roots, a story stirred, not to be told, but to tell. The story that wrote the world. I had heard of it only in rumor. A scroll not meant for scribes, not for kings, not even for gods. A scroll that didn't describe the world. It built it, word by word, law by law. Bone by bone, they said it had been written. By the first breath, before language was born. They said its words were not learned, they were inherited. Carried in blood, whispered in dreams. I never believed it, until the palace took me there. It began with a door, one that appeared only when I walked backwards through the mirror hall, reciting my own name in reverse. A meme or eyed a trick, a ritual. Or perhaps the palace itself, testing if I was ready. The door was made of black bone, not carved, grown. And behind it, silence so loud, it knocked the air from my lungs. I stepped through, no room, no floor. Just a space between realities. Suspended on ink, yes, link, I floated above an ocean of it. Thick, vast ... alive. And in the middle of that ocean, an island ... a single pedestal, a scroll on it, bound with string that pulsed, as if wrapped with arteries. The moment I touched it, the world changed. Not all at once, but in pulses. The ceiling of the palace turned into a sky I had never seen before, stars aligned in letters. The wind sang in sentences, the trees in the courtyard rearranged their branches into the shapes of ancient runes, and my own hand began to glow. Not with light, with grammar, lines forming on my skin, punctuation blooming like scars. I opened the scroll, there were no words, only spaces, empty lines, but as I thought, let there be ground beneath me. The ink responded, it rose, formed letters, and beneath my feet a path appeared, stone as stable, named ... because names give shape. I tested it further, let there be light, and the ink wrote, light. The space illuminated, not by sun, but by intent. I trembled, because now I knew. This scroll did not record truth, it authored it. Sweat cold on my back, eye stinging, and around me. The names on the walls shivered, because now they knew. If Soraya could return, any of them could. Even the ones we all tried to forget together. Even the ones that scared us ... Even the ones who knew too much. I stared at the bowl of ink. It had changed again, but the words followed me. Etched into my footprints ... The scroll pulsed. The empty lines, hungry ... The scroll wanted to be filled. But once I did, what would I become? Author or subject, I asked aloud. If I write peace, does war cease? The quill-mouthed figure wrote. If you write light, what happens to shadow? I stood at the edge of possibility, the ink lapped at the pedestal like waves. And deep within the scroll, something wept ... Not a person, a memory. An echo from the first line ever written. In the beginning. There was a reader, and I realized, perhaps this scroll was never meant to be completed. Only glimpsed, because the moment a story ends, its power sleeps ... But while it remains open, unwritten, it can dream. I rolled the scroll back, rebound it, stepped away, and the path beneath me dissolved. I fell, not into death, but into story. The palace caught me, reshaped itself, and in the chamber of origins, a new shelf appeared. No label. No ink, just space, waiting. And beside it, a blank scroll and a pen, mine. I left the story that wrote the world, where it belonged, unwritten, untamed, untrapped, because no single person should own the alphabet of existence. But perhaps we can each hold one line, and with it, make the world just a little more true. The lightning came first, not in the sky, but in the walls. Cracks that flashed, forked, grew roots, and from those roots, letters, not Latin, not Chinese, not glyphs, not runes, but something older than all of them, a shape that was not meant to be read, only feared. It started in the Hall of Thrones, a place long sealed, abandoned after the last emperor choked to death. On a word he never finished, no one dared enter, not even spirits. But I had to, because the walls were bleeding ink, and inside was a single word, half written, but enough to split the marble floor beneath it. Just that fragment, and the air turned to iron. I tried to approach, my legs failed. I tried to speak, my mouth filled with salt. I tried to blink. My eyes saw fire between the cracks, not metaphor, actual fire, burning from the name itself. Then the whisper came. Low, gravel breath, unborn tongue. It said, "Why have you come, little scribe?" I couldn't see the source, but the wall shuddered, as if something behind it was waking. And it spoke again. This name is not for lips. It is for consequence. My voice returned barely. I asked, "Whose name is this?" The answer came as a wind, strong enough to strip flesh from thought. The first one, who tried to write the end of everything. The marble split. A glyph slithered out, coiled like a serpent, hissed like broken history. It wrapped around the throne. The throne crumbled, not to dust, but 2 letters, old, torn, begging. I realized then, this was no ordinary name. It was a sentence, a verdict. A god had once been judged, and in punishment, their name was sealed beneath this palace, written only once, half erased, and feared by every deity that followed, because to write it was to risk awakening what it condemned. I turned, tried to flee, but the doors had sealed behind me. The ink on the wall twisted, forming words I understood. To know the name is to carry its choice. Choice? What choice? The glyphs pulsed. A shadow rose, no form, just presence, like standing in the gravity of a dead star, and it said, "Finish writing me. Set me free, or seal me forever." By writing your own name beside mine, I froze. The brush in my hand weighed. Like judgment, the wall pulsed again, and behind it, a heartbeat, not mine, not human, but ancient. I approached, lifted the brush. The ink shimmered. The wall whispered, "Write one of 3 endings." And suddenly, the wall gave me a vision. 3 futures. Point 1. If I finish the name, the gods tremble, the world shakes, time collapses, but from the ruin, a new world grows. Clean, untouched, unwritten. One without pain, or memory. Point 2. If I erase the name, the palace crumbles. The names I restored fade. History unravels, but balance remains. No gods die. No mortals burn, just silence. 3. If I write my name beside it, the name binds to me. I carry its burden, its power, its curse. I become the vessel, the keeper, the cage. Never free again, but neither is it. I stared at the wall, at the 3 letters that hung like blades, then at my own name, half visible in the ink on my wrist. I took the brush, and I wrote, not the name, not mine, but a new line. The story ends only when the reader forgets. The wall paused, the lightning stilled. The ink sighed ... The throne reformed. This time empty, but intact. The name vanished from the wall, but etched itself into the space behind my eyes. And I heard it whisper, "Clever scribe, you chose the fourth path, not silence, not power, but remembrance." I stepped out of the hall. The door crumbled behind me ... Sealed not by stone, but by choice. And now I carry it, the name that the gods feared to write, not on paper, but in memory. Tamed not by force, but by humility. And sometimes, when I sleep, I hear it humming. Not angry, not sad, just waiting. It came in a vial ... small. Glass blown from obsidian, sealed with silk so old, it crumbled when I touched it. The label had long faded, but as I unwrapped it, the scent rose, salt and sorrow, and the ink inside moved ... not like liquid, like breath, like grief curling its fingers inside a bottle. I found it in the chamber of unused scripts, a vault where pens dried, and ideas died in silence. Most inks in there had turned to dust, but this one, still warm, still viscous, still weeping. I opened the vial. A single drop fell onto the scroll, and it began. The ink did not wait for my hand. It slitthered ... crawled, formed lines, letters, then a sentence. I remember her name. I froze. Because I hadn't written that, not thought it, but someone had. And the ink was listening. I tried again, lifted my brush, dipped it into the vial. The ink clung to the bristles, like a child to its mother, reluctant, tender, and when I wrote, the palace was silent. The words twitched, then rewrote themselves. The palace had not been silent, only too full of voices long denied. I gasped. The ink was editing me. Not out of rebellion, out of truth. As if it could hear the versions I dared not admit ... and correct them. The scroll shimmered ... the letters pulsed, and new words began to write themselves. She stood in the garden of forgotten wives. Her feet bled from dancing barefoot on memory. Each petal she plucked spoke her name back to her. None of this was mine, but I knew the voice, Anaha. One of the first names I had restored, the concubine who died dancing. When the emperor chose another, the ink was remembering for her ... I trembled. Because this was no ordinary ink. This was the tears of the written. A forbidden blend, said to be made from water drawn from beneath execution grounds, ash of destroyed love letters, and tears collected from mouths that never spoke their names aloud. Only one scribe had ever dared use it. He went mad, because the ink never stopped writing. I tried to close the vial, but it leaked, spilled across the scroll. And the scroll writhed, words spilled like veins. Paragraphs birthed themselves in seconds. And in the middle of the page, a name appeared. Yuma, but not mine, another Yuma. A woman, a mother, a writer before me. I watched as her story poured out. She had once been the Empress's secret keeper. She had written songs in blood, so no one else could hear them. And when her child died unnamed, she bottled her grief into this ink. She had written nothing more after that ... because she had no more to give, only her sorrow, which lived, which remembered. Now I knew. This ink was a vessel of voices unsent. Every drop, a scream that never reached a page. And now, they wanted to speak, through me ... or in spite of me. The scroll moved, unrolled itself, spilled onto the floor, wrapped around the table legs, climbed the walls. Words swam across surfaces, history, secrets, love confessions, death vows, all written by no hand. All true. I cried, stop. The ink paused, wavered, then wrote, we are not trying to take from you. We only ask, remember us correctly. I nodded ... swallowed tears, and placed the scroll on the altar. Beneath the chamber's heart light, I dipped the brush and asked aloud, "Who wants to speak first?" The ink replied, "The girl who gave her name to the rain, but was buried without one." I let the ink guide my hand. It wrote her name, Urine. It wrote her story, how she died at 16, after hiding the Empress's bastard child. How she had carved lullabies into the palace floor, with broken fingernails. How she still sang when the storms came. I wrote 4 hours, 4 voices I had never met, 4 wounds I had never seen. But the ink had ... because ink made from tears remembers where it flowed from by dawn. The scroll wrapped the entire chamber, a mural of memory, a symphony of survival ... and at its center, a mirror, not one I had placed. It had formed from ink, reflecting not my face, but every name I had forgotten ... I stared into it, it stared back, then wrote one final line: ink never dries. When memory still bleeds, I sealed the vial ... not to imprison it, but to promise I will write for those who bled into silence. It was never meant to be read aloud. A single word, not long, not strange, just heavy, like bone soaked in centuries ... They say it wasn't made by a human tongue, but carved from silence. Between the first 2 sounds in the universe, the word that ate the writer, not because it kills, but because it consumes identity. The name of the last person who wrote it has been erased, not forgotten, erased. As if the ink leapt backward, devoured their signature, then kept going. Through their journals, their memories, their birth, and now the word was back. I found it beneath the archive, lower than any map had marked. A stairway of whispers ... each step made of ash pressed into stone. And at the bottom, a chamber. No light, no walls, only echo. And in the center, a tablet. Suspended in nothing ... On it, one word. Written in strokes that pulse like veins, not in any language I knew. But I understood it, in my marrow, in my dreams, in the parts of me that did not have names. The word was Amaru when I whispered it. The room shivered, not physically. Conceptually, time faltered. Memories I had never lived flashed through me. A woman whispering her lover's name, only to forget who he was. A child drawing a symbol in the sand, and vanishing as the tide washed it away. A tree speaking once in a storm, then rotting from the roots up. Because it remembered the sound, I blinked ... sweating. The tablet now bore my reflection, not as I was, but as I would be, if I finished writing the word. Yama, scribe, remembrancer. Gone, in their place, story. Not a writer, written. I stumbled back, the tablet pulsed again. The word stretched, grew new arms, branches, each one leading to a different Yama. In different timelines, one who became a tree, one who became a book, one who became a palace, one who became ink. Each one had spoken the word, each one had been consumed, but not destroyed, absorbed ... by the word. I fell to my knees, and I asked, why? The word answered, not with sound, with memory. It poured into me like molten breath, and it said, writers seek to name everything, but who will name the writer? I am the final punctuation, the end of ego, the last breath. Before story takes shape without author, I cried, because it was beautiful and terrifying. I saw the world without scribes. Only voices, only meaning, only stories that shaped themselves, wrote themselves, spoke each other into being, a chorus of untethered narrative. But in it, no Yama, because Yama would be part of it. No longer a part, I stood, and I made a choice. I opened my scroll, dipped my brush, and instead of copying the word, I wrote a footnote, a line beneath the word. Let the story be free, but let the writer remember. The first word was love. The tablet paused. For the first time, it hesitated. And in that hesitation, I rewrote the rule. The word did not eat me. It bowed. Accepted a bargain. Instead of swallowing me whole. It whispered, then carry me, but never say me again. And so I did. I sealed it, bound it in a scroll, stitched with threads from my own hair, and buried it, not in stone, but in language itself. Every time I write now, a piece of it hums, but never fully wakes, unless someone else speaks its name. So I write carefully. So I live carefully, because I carry a word that once consumed gods, turned cities into silence, and turned writers into stories, and it lives in me now, not to devour, but to remind that every story is also a grave, and every grave can bloom into ink. They said it was not a sentence, not a phrase, not a word, but a structure, a shape made of syntax, a web of breath, rhythm, tension, like scaffolding for the soul. One dead scribe once wrote in a forgotten tongue. Grammar is not how we say things, it is how the universe holds itself together. And someone, a long, long time ago, had written a grammar so precise, so powerful, it cracked the sky. The cracks were still there, faint, only visible under eclipse, but if you looked, really looked, the constellations were misaligned. Not from age, from syntax collapse. I didn't believe the rumors. Until the palace gave me the manuscript. It was waiting on my desk. No fanfare, no shadowy delivery, just a scroll, wrapped in cloud dust parchment, smelled of rain that hadn't fallen yet, and written on the outside. Syntax, level omega, use with breath held. Release only if ready to forget gravity. I opened it. The letters inside didn't sit still. They hovered, spaced themselves with intention. Phrases curled around each other like lovers. Clauses nested in clauses, each dependent on the next. Like ribs in a living cage, I touched one verb, and the chandelier above me sank 6 inches, not fell, not dropped, sank, like it had just remembered the weight of meaning. The grammar was doing something. Not metaphorically, literally. I blinked. Reread the first sentence, it said. When the subject refuses to exist, the predicate will compensate, and as I spoke it aloud, my own name disappeared from the room. Not just written, forgotten. Even I had to pause to recall who I was. I flipped to the second page. Another sentence. If a noun believes it is a verb, it shall move. I whispered it. And the chair beside me stood up, walked away. No legs, no joints, just syntax reassigning function. I fell back, the manuscript pulsed, and now the scroll spoke directly to me. Grammar is control, but advanced grammar is permission, and the omega syntax is sacrilege. Because it did not describe reality, it rescripted it. I asked aloud, who wrote this? The ink reshaped, formed a single name, Vimara, not a person, a theory, a godling who once tried to rewrite the laws of cause and effect using only grammar. She succeeded and vanished. Because once the universe was made flexible, she slipped through the clauses. Now, her grammar was mine. I tested another line. When a conjunction is spoken in regret, lightning shall bend. I whispered but with grief. The window flashed, the thunder bent sideways. I shivered, because now I understood the danger. This grammar didn't just respond to speech. It responded to intention. I tested one final clause. The passive voice delays reality. I said. The door was opened, and it didn't open, not yet. But 10 minutes later, with no one near it, it creaked open on its own. That night, I couldn't sleep, because the scroll pulsed on my shelf, calling me, inviting me. Daring me to do the one thing no one had ever done. Apply Amiga syntax to time, and I wrote. The past shall have been being rewritten by the future's subjunctive mood. The air tore, not with sound, but with possibility, time bent. I saw my childhood blink, my mother became to people. My scars moved, and in the mirror, I saw a version of me that had never written a single word. She smiled. You chose the grammar, she said. I chose the silence. The scroll burned, rewriting its own clauses. But one line remained unchanged. Do not use this to fix grief. Grief is the only syntax that is always true. I closed it, bound it, locked it beneath a page made of non-language, a surface where nothing could ever be written, because now I knew some grammar is not meant for control. Some grammar exists to test the humility of the writer. And when you break the sky, you must learn to write only in whispers. It began like any other sentence, soft, measured, inscribed on the wall of a forgotten hallway, where no one walked, no one breathed, and no one dared remember. And yet, the sentence never stopped. At first glance, it seemed elegant, a simple preamble. I, the veiled one, do hereby speak. But the next clause linked to another, and another, and another, until the line twisted around the corridor, looped into the ceiling, and then spiraled downward. Like a serpent choking on its own grammar, I followed it. I shouldn't have. But something in the ink pulled. As if it didn't just want to be read, it needed to be remembered. And deep down, I knew why. Because the moment someone reads the entire sentence aloud, it ends, and the soul trapped inside it is released. The scribes called it the unfinished oath, a curse disguised as grammar. A voice so desperate to be heard, it stitched itself into an eternal clause, so long as the sentence is never finished. The voice stays trapped, but finish it, and it becomes wrath. I brought my lantern, stepped carefully, each word curled under my feet. Some were nouns, some were bones, others felt like memories that had been dissected and pinned to syntax. I touched one verb, to forgive, and it hissed, rewrote itself in two, to avenge. The sentence adapted. It didn't want peace. It wanted justice. I kept walking. The sentence climbed the stairs ahead of me. Formed walls around me, enclosed me, in clauses that echoed. I, whose child was fed to dogs for the crime of being born. Do declare by fire, by blood, by syllable, that. Then it paused. Waiting. I realized something terrible. It needed a reader to supply the final predicate. It had trapped countless others this way. That's why their names were smudged across the wall, not carved. Their voices tried to finish the sentence and were swallowed into it. They became adjectives, grammatical ghosts, descriptors of suffering. I reached the heart of the hallway. A stone table, upon it, a quill, still wet, still moving. It danced in place. Writing nothing, but waiting. I approached. It wrote, "Will you finish the sentence for me?" I whispered, "Who are you?" The wall replied, but not with language, with image. A woman, face veiled, eyes hollow, mouth sewn shut with black thread, but her hands, they bled ink. She had been the scribe of betrayals, forced to write forgiveness for the man who buried her child. And when she refused, they cursed her, bound her into a sentence that could not be completed, because if it did, the emperor would die, and with him, the palace itself. I understood now. This wasn't a sentence, it was a bomb, a clause held mid-breath. 4 centuries. And now it trembled, because I had read almost all of it. And only one word remained. The quill lifted. Wrote a final prompt. If you say the word thus, the sentence will conclude, and I will be free. But so will my rage. I backed away, but the walls closed in. Grammar pressed against me like breath. Say it. You are a scribe. You exist to complete, to punctuate, to bring silence after meaning. But I remembered the word. That once ate the writer. I remembered the ink. That never dried. I remembered the syntax. That bent thunder. And I knew. Some sentences do not need to end. They need to be rewritten. So I stepped forward, took the quill, and instead of completing the sentence, I wrote a counter-syntax beneath it. But if a clause is born in pain, and the reader weeps before the end, the sentence shall become a poem, and the curse shall turn into prayer. The wall groaned, the ink bled gold, and the veiled woman smiled for the first time. Her mouth unstitched, she did not scream. She sang, and the sentence did not end. It lifted ... floated, turned into calligraphy, that spelled across the stars, not vengeance, not violence, but vindication. And to this day, when you look at the sky and see a streak of gold, that doesn't move, you're seeing the sentence, still writing, still remembering, still refusing to let pain be its only punctuation. I found the blueprint in a dream, folded between the pages of a book that had never been written. It hummed low, like a funeral hymn composed by someone who died in the middle of the refrain. At first, it looked ordinary. Columns, shelves, floors of ancient cedar, windows that opened into soft dusk. But when I traced the lines with my finger, the parchment winced, as if remembering fire. Because this library was never built, not destroyed, erased from time, before it could take form. But its contents, still alive, scattered, rootless, hiding inside, people ... The map pulsed. A sentence bloomed along the edge. The library was never born, but it was never forgotten. I awoke gasping, and with me, a name. A voice in my mind that did not belong to me. It whispered, "You've read me before." In a building that never stood. Let me out. I tried to dismiss it. A fever dream, but the name stayed. Pressed behind my eyes, each time I blinked. I saw a title I hadn't read, but somehow remembered. The Anatomy of Grief in 7 languages. How to Kill a God with Punctuation. Chronicles of the Unborn Names. All of them from the same place, the Ashen Library. The archive that should have existed, but was destroyed the moment someone dared to imagine it, because its shelves held books that described how the world could end, and worse, how it could restart. The ancients burned the blueprints, unthought the architects, but they forgot one thing. Stories, once conceived, do not die. They migrate. I wasn't the only one. Others walked the streets muttering titles they could never have seen. A weaver in the southern district spoke imperfect iambic verse, but only during thunderstorms. A boy was born able to quote entire passages from a book no one had written yet. And an old man in the market once told me, "Don't think about the library too hard, girl. She listens, and when she hears her name, she tries to rebuild herself inside you." It was too late for me. By the third night, I began dreaming in cool numbers, floating decimals, dusty codes, the Dewey Decimal System, tattooed behind my ribs. On the 5th night, the books began to manifest. It started small, a single phrase, etched into the wood of my desk. Introduction to Ecologic, Chapter 1. I scraped it off, but it reappeared, in my notebook, then in my tea leaves, then horrifyingly, in my blood. When I pricked my finger, the droplet spelled, "Library card confirmed." I needed help. I went to the oracles of ink. They read the lines on my palms, like margins of a borrowed manuscript. They said, "You are hosting a narrative seed. The Ashen Library is choosing hosts. It's trying to rewrite itself, using living bodies as architecture." I whispered, "Can I stop it?" They hesitated, then handed me a page, ripped from a book that no longer existed. On it, the only way to silence a library is to tell its final story, a dangerous idea, because no one knew the final story. Not even the library, and to try writing it meant becoming the index, the archive, the tombstone. But I had no choice. The books inside me grew louder. I no longer dreamt. I shelved ... organized the emotions of strangers. By tone, genre, and regret, I smelled of binding glue. When I cried, the tears were perfectly aligned footnotes. So I wrote the final story. It began in a city built from forgotten intentions. A girl became a shelf because she remembered too much. And as I wrote, the library pushed back. It did not want to end. It offered me visions of halls lined with infinite wisdom, of readers never growing old, of a world where no story is lost. But I wrote anyway, because I knew a story that refuses to end becomes a prison. As I penned the last sentence, and the books returned to silence, a wind tore through the room. The walls peeled back, like the covers of an old volume. I saw them, every book that ever nested in me, fly upward, spines glowing, whispers fading ... back into the ash of not yet. And I collapsed, not dead, but emptied. No more borrowed titles, no more dream shelving ... Just me, Yuma, a girl with ink in her lungs, and silence in her hands. And when I touched my chest, where the call number once burned, I found a bookmark left behind with one line. The library never needed walls, just memory. The record said it spoke only once. Not whispered ... not cried, not sung ... spoke. Just one sentence, and every surface, brick, bone, bark, heard it, and then refused to repeat it. They called it the voice without echo, not because it lacked power, but because it left nothing behind to bounce off of. It flattened meaning, burned through memory, and even now, centuries later, scholars speak of it with a shiver. The day the mountains swallowed their names, the moment air forgot how to carry vibration, when language grew teeth and bit its own tongue. I didn't believe it, not until the map turned blank. I was tracing the old city, looking for ruins, following a riddle inscribed on a staircase that led nowhere. Find the word that cannot be followed. And as I reached the 22nd step, the ink disappeared, not smudged, not faded, erased ... like the map itself was afraid. I reached for my own voice, to sing, to hum, anything to anchor me. But no sound came. The voice was near. I knew it not by hearing, but by absence. Like a hole in a song you can't unnotice once found, like a breath withheld for too many generations. And in the silence it spoke, not aloud, not inside my ears, inside my ink. My quill twitched, my hands seized, my veins hummed with consonants I had never learned. And on the parchment before me, a sentence wrote itself. If you write this, you must not read it. If you read it, you must not speak it. If you speak it, the echo dies with you. My body froze, because I'd already read it, silently, but that was enough. And now there would be no echo, but something strange happened. My shadow spoke for me. It moved on its own, raised a finger, drew words on the wall. With its own silhouette. Not all echoes are heard. Some are felt, and some rewrite the echo itself. I stared, trembled. The voice wasn't gone. It was evolving, learning to echo in new ways, through shadow, through ink, through memory. Suddenly, all around me, walls began to ripple, and on every surface. Words, ancient, unfamiliar, but painfully familiar in emotion, they said. We spoke once, and the world forgot us, but now we remember, and we choose a new echo. The air shimmered, 1,000 silent syllables. Pressed into my skin, I felt, regret not mine, joy never lived, promises made by mouths long turned to dust. All of it, inside me. I was no longer Yama the scribe. I was becoming Yama the resonance, not an echo, not a voice, but the space between them. I dropped my pen. My fingers bled vowels. The ground beneath me murmured with phonemes that had no tongue. Then I heard it, not with ears, with soul, a line, the one the voice had once spoken, the forbidden sentence. And I understood why it had no echo. Because it wasn't meant to repeat. It was meant to complete. The voice hadn't ended things. It had finished them, every war, every story, every sorrow, given closure, in one unspeakable line. And now it needed a new ending. A softer one not made of finality, but of forgiveness. So I wrote, not the forbidden sentence, but the response. The echo, we heard you, and we are not afraid. Let the silence speak kindness. Let the unnamed be remembered. Let the voice rest. The room exhaled. The shadows wept. And for the first time in centuries, the voice echoed, not in sound, but in peace. And I wrote down the moment, not in ink, but in a tear, preserved on parchment that no fire could burn, sealed with the silence of the voice that spoke once, and was heard, finally, by someone brave enough not to repeat it. The page waited. 4 centuries, not under lock, nor buried in ash, but folded in a silence too deep to disturb. It wasn't the last page of a book, it was the first page of what should have been the last book, but the writer never arrived, because the writer was never real. The scribes said Yama died at the last entry. Some said she became ink. Some said she became language itself. But the truth, she became a question, one that no answer dared approach. I came across the page by accident. Also I thought it was inside a drawer that didn't exist on any map, inside a room that wasn't listed on the blueprints of a palace no one remembered building. The page was blank. Yet I felt watched, not by eyes, by intent. I touched it, and the world paused. The shadows leaned in, the dust hushed. Even the memories that had never belonged to me held their breath, because the page was turning by itself, and as it turned, the book rewrote itself backward. Words and spooled. Ink ran uphill, parchment healed its burns, and at the center of all things, a name disappeared. Yama, not erased, not destroyed, just never written. The final page revealed a truth no one had dared think. The scribe never existed. We needed her, so we dreamed her. And in dreaming her, she began to write us back. The voice wasn't mine, nor anyone's. It was the book speaking, the book that had recorded every story Yama had ever told, and now it asked a question. Not with words, with a blank space, a void at the center of a sentence. I leaned forward, and the book wrote, "Do you still believe she was ever real?" I hesitated, because in every heartbeat, in every drop of ink I'd spilled, I had known her, but now I saw the truth. Yama was the voice I gave to the questions I feared to ask. She was the scribe, because I needed a witness. She was the writer, because I needed a mirror. So I answered, yes, even if she was never real. What she wrote became real. The page turned again. And this time, it turned me. I felt my name dissolve, not painfully, gently, like dew warming into mist, and in its place, 1,000 stories. Some I had lived, some I had imagined, some had written me ... And at the very center of that spiral, a phrase, one Yama had never written, but always carried the first sentence. She never dared ink. Now, the book did it for her. There was once a girl who dreamed of a name and gave it to silence. That silence became the world I wept ... Not because it ended, but because there was nothing left to end. The book closed itself, the room folded away, and the final line remained on the air. A story is never finished, only forgotten, until someone dreams again. And in that moment, a girl awoke, not with a pen, not with a name, just a whisper. I remember her. The wind turned the page, one last time. And though no ink remained, the air shimmered with a single truth. Some stories write the world, and some are the world. The end, or perhaps the beginning.